Steelers Nation, pay attention. The Pittsburgh Steelers are walking into Ford Field this week with something that feels very familiar to anyone who knows this franchise, the perfect setup to surprise people. While most of the league already treats this game as a likely loss, the reality is very different and far more dangerous. The Steelers and the Lions both come in at 8-6, fighting directly for playoff positioning. But the pressure? It's not the same on both sidelines. Detroit is playing for survival. A loss could nearly end their postseason hopes, especially with the Bears lurking. On the other side, Pittsburgh isn't stepping onto the field in desperation mode. They're stepping in with opportunity. This isn't a must-win game mathematically, but it is a game that can completely reshape the final 2 weeks of the season, shake up the AFC North race, and redefine this team's ceiling in 2024. And history has taught us one thing. When the Steelers play with opportunity instead of fear, they're at their most dangerous. Today, we're breaking down what's really at stake, why this matchup is much bigger than it looks, and how Pittsburgh can leave Detroit in an even stronger position in the playoff hunt. If you're Steelers to the core, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it, because the conversation starts now. Detroit comes into this game with the most explosive scoring offense in the NFL, averaging over 30 points per game, top 5 in yards per game and yards per play, and elite efficiency numbers across both the run and the pass. Jared Goff is at the center of it all, operating one of the league's most effective play-action attacks under Dan Campbell, who now calls plays himself. This is a modern pro-style offense built on under-center looks, heavy play-action, and quick, decisive throws over the middle. Goff has become one of the best pure and structure quarterbacks in football, especially when defenses are forced to respect the run. He protects the ball at an elite level, with only 8 giveaways on the season, the best mark in the league, and that discipline is a huge reason why Detroit stays competitive even when the defense struggles. And that defense has struggled, especially lately. Injuries have torn through the Lions roster, particularly on the back end. Brian Branch is out. Sam Laporta is out. Terrion Arnold is out. Levi Amuzarek, Christian Mahogany, and Joshua Pascal are also unavailable. On top of that, both starting safeties, Kirby Joseph and Thomas Harper, are questionable, along with slot corner Amick Robertson. That is a massive amount of uncertainty for a secondary that already ranks near the bottom of the league in scoring defense. Detroit sits 23rd in points allowed, with the only real bright spot being third down defense. If the Steelers can stay on schedule and avoid long yardage situations, there will be opportunities to move the ball. From a Steelers perspective, the stakes are obvious. A win here puts real pressure on Baltimore heading into Sunday night. If Pittsburgh takes care of business and the Ravens stumble, the Steelers suddenly hold a 2-game division lead with 2 games left. That opens the door to clinching the AFC North in Week 17 with a win over Cleveland. That's not hype. That's the reality of the standings. And it's why this game, even as an underdog on the road, matters so much. The injury situation on Pittsburgh's side is worth watching too. TJ Watt, Isaac Sumolo dealing with a triceps injury, Nick Herbig with a hamstring, James Pierre with a calf issue, and Andrew Pete still in concussion protocol all carry question marks. But the potential return of Derek Harmon is enormous for this defense. When Harmon is on the field, the Steelers' run defense stabilizes in a way that changes the entire structure of the unit. That matters against a Detroit offense powered by one of the most dangerous backfield duos in football. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, known as Sonic and Knuckles, are the engine. Gibbs brings elite speed and explosiveness, both as a runner and as a receiver out of the backfield. Montgomery brings power, balance, and consistency between the tackles. Together, they force defenses to stay disciplined and honest. Goff loves the check down to Gibbs, and with his low average depth of target this season, that short passing game is not a weakness, it's a feature. The Steelers cannot lose track of number 0 at any point, whether it's between the tackles or leaking out into the flat. Up front, Detroit's offensive line is still strong, led by Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, arguably the best right tackle in football. But there are matchups Pittsburgh can attack, especially on the interior. Cam Hayward has already shown this season what he can do against vulnerable guards, and that remains a key area to watch. If the Steelers can win early downs, force third and long, and take play action off the table, that's where Jared Goff becomes uncomfortable. His pocket presence under pressure is not elite, and he does not offer much outside of structure. Make him hold the ball, take away the first read, and let the pass rush hunt. All of this sets the stage for a game that feels closer than most projections want to admit. The Lions are favored, the trends lean slightly toward Detroit, and the environment will be loud and hostile. But this is also a battered defense facing a Steelers offense with speed on the outside and a quarterback playing his best football of the season. The margin in this game is thin, and one late play could swing everything. just like it so often does for this franchise. So as this matchup approaches, with playoff implications on both sides and pressure mounting in the division, how confident are you that the Steelers can walk into Detroit and flip the script on a team fighting for its life? And what do you think will ultimately decide this game? What this game ultimately comes down to is whether the Steelers can force Detroit out of its comfort zone for long enough stretches to let their own strengths take over. We've talked all season about how certain offensive styles give Pittsburgh problems, and this Lions offense checks many of those boxes. Heavy under-center usage, aggressive play action, throws over the middle, and a quarterback who thrives when everything is on schedule. That formula has stressed the Steelers at times this year, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But context matters, and this version of Detroit is not operating at full strength, especially on the defensive side of the ball. When you flip this matchup around and look at the Steelers' offense against the Lions' defense, you can see where the cracks are. Detroit plays a lot of man coverage, a lot of press, and they don't shy away from aggression. That's who they are, and historically they don't change that identity even when injuries pile up. With so many question marks in the secondary, that style becomes risky, because it only takes one missed jam or one safety arriving late to turn a normal play into a chump game. That's where Pittsburgh's speed becomes a real factor. DK Metcalf brings elite straight-line speed and physicality. Calvin Austin III can stress defenses horizontally and vertically. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is another vertical threat who can flip the field with a single target. Against press-man coverage, those traits matter. Aaron Rodgers' recent stretch of play also changes the equation. Over the last 2 games, he's been decisive, accurate, and willing to push the ball downfield when the look is there. That aggression is exactly what you need against a defense like this. Detroit will challenge receivers at the line. They will try to speed up the quarterback, and they will live with the consequences if they miss. If Rodgers continues to throw with timing and confidence, there will be opportunities for explosive plays, especially with a depleted secondary that may be forced to rotate players who are not fully healthy. Protection, however, is non-negotiable. Aiden Hutchinson is the type of edge rusher who can wreck a game if left alone. Even with Troy Fautanu playing well this season, Hutchinson demands chip help and awareness on every snap. The rest of Detroit's defensive front is solid but not overwhelming, which makes Hutchinson the clear focal point. If the Steelers manage him properly and avoid negative plays early in drives, the offense can stay on schedule and keep Detroit from teeing off. Turnovers are another massive swing factor. The Lions are elite at protecting the football. The Steelers have been just as impressive lately, with 0 turnovers over the last 2 games and a perfect record this season when they win the turnover battle. This team's identity under Mike Tomlin has always been tied to situational football. When Pittsburgh avoids self-inflicted mistakes, their win probability skyrockets. In a game that projects to be close and potentially high-scoring, 1 turnover could be the difference between walking out of Ford Field with momentum or regret. Then there's the fourth quarter, where these games tend to be decided. Detroit will score points. Jared Goff will have his moments. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams will test the middle and the edges of the field. But if the Steelers can hang around, if they can force a punt or 2 late, and if someone in black and gold makes a defining play when it matters most, that's when this team becomes incredibly difficult to beat. We've seen it before this season. We've seen games swing on a single drive, a single stop, or a single explosive play. This is not about style points. It's about positioning. A win here changes the entire AFC North landscape and puts the Steelers in control of their own destiny in a way few expected weeks ago. A loss doesn't end the season, but it does narrow the margin for error significantly. That's why this matchup carries weight far beyond the scoreboard. What makes this stretch of the season so compelling is that it strips everything down to truth. No projections, no preseason expectations, no narratives about what this team was supposed to be. You are exactly what your record says you are, and right now the Steelers are an 8-6 team with a legitimate path to controlling the division if they handle their business. Games like this are where you find out how real that path is. Road environment, elite offense on the other side, a team fighting to keep its season alive, and very little margin for error. This is the NFL in December at its most honest. There's also a mental component to this matchup that shouldn't be ignored. Detroit knows what this game means. Their backs are against the wall. That desperation can create urgency and energy early, but it can also lead to mistakes if things don't go according to plan. If the Steelers can absorb that initial punch, settle the game down, and force Detroit to chase instead of dictate, the pressure subtly shifts. Suddenly it's not just about execution, it's about expectation. And expectation can be heavy, especially for a team whose defense is patched together and whose playoff hopes are hanging by a thread. For Pittsburgh, the formula is familiar. Stay disciplined on early downs. Don't give the Lions short fields. Win situational football. Limit explosives just enough to keep the game within reach. And when the moment comes, trust that someone will step up. because that has been the defining trait of this team all season. It hasn't always been clean. It hasn't always been dominant, but it has been resilient. This group has found ways to survive games where the margins were razor thin, and those experiences matter when you walk into a building like Ford Field. You also can't overlook how much belief changes inside a locker room when scenarios like this start becoming real. The idea that a win here could put the Steelers 1 week away from clinching the AFC North is not theoretical. Players feel that. Coaches feel that. It sharpens focus and elevates urgency without crossing into panic. That balance is hard to achieve, and it's one of the reasons this team continues to hover in the playoff picture year after year. Whether this game turns into a shootout or tightens into a fourth-quarter chess match, it's going to demand discipline, patience, and 1 or 2 defining plays. That's usually how it goes when the Steelers are involved. Nothing comes easy. Nothing is handed to them. But when they're at their best, they're comfortable living in that tension, waiting for the moment that decides everything. As the clock winds down on the regular season, the margin between confidence and consequence becomes razor thin, and that's exactly where the Steelers find themselves heading into this matchup. This isn't about playing perfect football, because perfection doesn't exist in December. It's about managing chaos better than the team across from you. Detroit thrives when the game flows on their terms, when the run game feeds the play action, when Goff can rhythmically carve up space between the numbers. Disrupt that rhythm just enough, and suddenly every snap carries more weight for them than it does for you. That's where Pittsburgh's defensive identity still matters, even when it bends. This defense has lived on the edge all season, giving up yards but tightening when it has to. Red zone stands, third down pressure, and late game adjustments have kept them alive in moments where other teams would have folded. Against an offense as efficient as Detroit's, you're not trying to shut them down completely. You're trying to steal possessions. One stalled drive, one third and long stop, one pressure that forces Goff to speed up his internal clock. Those moments don't always show up in box scores, but they change outcomes. Offensively, this game is also a test of trust. Trust in protection calls. Trust in receivers winning one-on-one. Trust in taking calculated risks without forcing throws. Against a defense that plays press man and challenges everything underneath, hesitation is deadly. Decisiveness creates space. And if the Steelers can hit 1 or 2 explosive plays early, it forces Detroit to back off just enough to open up the rest of the field. That's when drives extend, time of possession swings, and the Lions' offense is left watching instead of dictating. There's also the reality that this season has quietly hardened this team. Close wins, late game pressure, and constant scrutiny have created a group that is comfortable being uncomfortable. That matters on the road, in a loud building, against a team that knows it may not get another chance. Experience in those moments isn't theoretical. It shows up in body language, in communication, and how quickly a team regroups after adversity. No matter how it unfolds, this game is going to reveal something real about who the Steelers are right now. Are they a team hanging around the playoff picture, or a team ready to seize control when opportunity knocks? The answer won't come from talk or expectations. It will come from execution, resilience, and whether they can make the one play that separates December contenders from everyone else. There's also a bigger picture forming underneath all of this that Steelers fans shouldn't ignore. Games like this are the bridge between simply qualifying for the postseason and actually being taken seriously once you get there. Winning in this environment, against this style of offense, with this much at stake, sends a message inside the locker room first and foremost. It reinforces that the formula works, even when conditions aren't ideal. It confirms that discipline, patience, and situational execution can travel, even into one of the louder buildings in the league. Detroit will test every layer of the Steelers' defense. They'll motion, they'll use condensed formations, they'll stress linebackers with play action and backs leaking into space. That's by design, and there will be moments where it looks uncomfortable. But what has defined Pittsburgh this season is not dominance, it's response. How quickly they adjust, how they limit damage after a breakdown, how they avoid letting one mistake turn into 2 or 3. That ability to stabilize matters just as much as splash plays. On the other side, this is also about growth. The Steelers' offense has spent much of the season trying to find consistency, and now they're being asked to sustain it in a game that could tilt the division. That's not a small thing. That's a real step forward if they can do it. Staying aggressive without being reckless. Taking what the defense gives you while still threatening them vertically. Making Detroit defend every blade of grass, especially with so many questions in the secondary. If Pittsburgh can string together complete drives and finish them, it changes the complexion of the entire afternoon. And when you zoom out even further, this is why the final weeks of the NFL season are so compelling. Every snap carries layered meaning. It affects standings, confidence, health, and momentum all at once. You don't get many opportunities where one win can ripple outward like this one can. The Steelers know it. Detroit definitely knows it. And that tension is exactly what makes this matchup feel heavier than a typical Week 16 game. By the time the fourth quarter arrives, this likely won't be about schemes or statistics anymore. It will be about poise, about who executes when everyone in the stadium knows what's coming, about who turns pressure into clarity instead of hesitation. That's where seasons pivot. At this point in the season, details become everything, and that's where this matchup quietly leans into Steelers football. Not flashy, not perfect, but deliberate. Every drive matters. Every substitution matters. Every decision made on the sideline carries weight. This is the kind of game where clock management, field position, and discipline can quietly swing the outcome without most viewers realizing it until the final score is already locked in. Detroit wants tempo. They want to dictate pace, keep you reacting, and force defenders to hesitate just long enough for lanes to open. Pittsburgh's job is to slow that down, make every snap feel heavier, force longer huddles, force Goff to reset protections, force the Lions to earn everything in small pieces instead of giving it to them in chunks. That kind of game doesn't always look pretty on television, but it's exactly how you survive on the road against a desperate team. And desperation cuts both ways. If Detroit jumps out early, the building will be electric. But if the Steelers hang around, trade scores, and refuse to let the Lions pull away, the pressure starts creeping in. That's when play calling tightens. That's when aggressive defenses take chances. That's when a single mistake can flip momentum completely. The Steelers have lived in those moments all year, and that experience is not accidental. This is also where leadership shows up, not just from coaches, but from players who understand situational football. Knowing when to get down in bounds, knowing when to take a sack instead of forcing a throw,